Hello, hello, and welcome to Journey to SCA 2025. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Shelley Ann Edwards Barron, your creative writing specialist who has dedicated every Tuesday around 11-ish for some time for us to discuss the report writing, narrative writing, and this year we've added in some comprehension so that I'll also be talking about comprehension. And if you've been following the live, thank you so much for taking your time and for, the patience with not always starting at 11 exactly. This morning, I was working out a few things that I really want to share with you today. So we're looking at for reports, we're talking about facts. For narratives, we're talking about paragraphing. And for the comprehension, we're taking our first look at nonfiction comprehension. But before we get into that, a little bit about me. If this is your first live, welcome. As I said, my name is Shellyanne, and I guess the short version is that I'm obsessed with multisensory learning when it comes to teaching creative writing in particular, because what I've seen is that we don't teach creative writing in a very interactive way for the most part, and many students grow up actually not liking creative writing as a result because it feels boring and lots of writing and it's kind of tedious. So what I do is to include practical activities, science experiments, artwork, drama, that kind of thing, to really make learning about writing come alive. So I do that in all my classes and I do that online. Yes, we do that online as well. And we have lots of fun learning all the different aspects of creative writing. I've been a writing teacher for, let's see, how long? Maybe close to 30 years. Yeah, I'm aging myself. But I've been a writing teacher for a long time. And I got started with English as a second language. And that is when I really started going into the details of how to teach writing in practical ways and not just tell students what to do, but show them and engage them in what they're doing. So, good news. Before I get started with reports, and let me um, nope. I'm just checking. I want to share my screen in a little bit, so that I'd be able to share um the information. For some reason, when I tried sharing it this morning, it um maybe I'll just do it like that. Yeah, it's kind of running on its own and without me asking it to go to the next slide. So I'll probably have to manually do that as we go, but we'll see how it works. Not sure why it's formatted like that, but I the what is it, I got distracted. Yeah. And another thing about me, and I think it's useful to share with you because it helps with the grace and compassion. I am not diagnosed, but I am certainly showing lots of the symptoms for ADHD. So I've self-diagnosed as ADHD. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about teaching to students in multisensory ways, because we have lots of students in the classroom who are they have challenges with focus. And I know one of the things I hear parents and teachers saying all the time, how do I get my child to focus? How do I get them to pay attention, especially when it comes to the writing? How do I get them to actually sit down and do this? Well, what I've learned is that through the multisensory learning, that's a strategy for ADHD and students who are considered divergent. When we use those kinds of strategies, we actually engage all students because lots of students actually do appreciate the interaction and it makes the learning a lot more practical and fun. And so while it's a strategy that it has been originally designed for working with students who have learning challenges, it works quite as well for students who don't because of all the interaction and fun that happens. So my answer to how do I get my child to focus? Make the lesson more interesting. And when it comes to creative writing and comprehension, That's what I would be talking about, giving you some ideas of how to actually make the lessons interesting. And so, if you've been following the live, let me get my schedule up. You would know that we have already covered schedules, creating schedules, and foundation concepts like definitions for reports and narratives. We've also looked at the 5 paragraph structure for reports. If you missed that one, that was last week. You can go back and check it. Um, and we started looking at plotting with the narratives last week as well. Now, this week, I'm going to take a little tangent on plotting, and we're talking about paragraphing because it is influenced by the plot and it helps with plot. So, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we would get back into the details of the plot next week again. Now, with today's reports, we're looking at facts and really getting started on focusing. And one of the reasons I mentioned all that whole thing about the ADHD is that even if a child has not been diagnosed, if it is they are showing signs and they cannot focus, they're having difficulty paying attention, there are things that we can do as parents and instructors when it comes to the teaching of the creative writing that would really help them understand what is being taught, feel excited about it, and actually be able to produce the writing in the ways that we would like them to. And part of that is breaking things up into smaller chunks. And so that's why, as we go through this series from we started in April, middle of April, and now and we're gonna be going until um roughly like middle March. Um each week I would be explaining to you some practical things, and we're doing it in small pieces first. We're giving instruction before we practice and test. All right. So let's see. Let me share public view. All right. I'm not getting it to share the way I want, so let's see if I could do it like this. Because I have an example that I want to show you. So today we're talking facts with report writing, and I wanted to put up my um header so that you could see, so that if you're going through the video, all right, this is where the report writing discussion begins. Ha, there we go. Yay. All right. So we're focusing on facts today with reports, and as always, if this is your first time with a live, I go reports first, then narratives, and then comprehension. All right. So with focusing on the facts, um let's start with a definition of facts. And this is something that I really want to kind of highlight, because what happens is that I don't know that the definition of what a fact is absolutely clear to everyone. And I feel like that kind of misunderstanding creates a conflict in students, even if they're not aware of it, right? It creates a conflict with students in terms of like what kinds of details they can include and so on. And yes, they need to understand what an opinion is, but I believe if, again, we focus on the facts, make sure they understand what a fact is. If it's not this, then you don't want it in the report. That's pretty much how you should go about it, right? And so we're looking at facts, which are details that can be verified using any of your 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. And these are observations that you can check and give practical evidence. And so that's the part that we really want to pay attention to. We can check it and give practical evidence. And the thing that creates the misunderstanding is the idea of what actually we can verify and what actually we can give evidence for. And if we work with that understanding and that foundation of giving evidence and being able to observe something, and this is primarily for the kind of reports that students will have to write, then what we're doing is positioning the student in a way that when they create their paragraphs and they add in the details for their reports, they would know this is what they're starting with, right? So let's see, I think I have an example here as well. So here I have two sentences. Orange is the name of a fruit and a color, and orange skies are beautiful. So we have two sentences. One is a statement of fact, the other one is an opinion. And so the main focus that you're getting your students to have fun with and really understand this week for reports is the difference between a fact and an opinion, what kinds of facts are important and useful for reports, what they don't need to include. So, again, on the undercurrent of this, understanding what is a fact and what is an opinion, we're also looking at making sure students understand what's relevant and what's irrelevant to their report. And so, orange is the name of a fruit and a color. That's something we can check. We can go to a dictionary, we can go to an encyclopedia, we can ask others, we can check this. Is the word orange or is the name orange the name of a fruit? And is the name orange also the name of a color? That's something that we can check. And we can get practical evidence, written evidence. We can get something objective as a response, a yes or a no. That's the kind of objective response that we get with facts, right? But when it comes to opinions, the key to recognizing what's an opinion is whether or not you have people like hesitating and thinking, sometimes, maybe, nah, I don't think so. That's when you get those kinds of reactions and you don't get a yes or a no, then that's when you're heading into um, opinion territory. And one of the challenges with the opinions is that opinions sneak into reports. And we're going to talk about this again so that you can see where they sneak into reports and how they sneak into reports. But opinions sneak into reports under the guise of being detailed and being thorough. But when you're looking into, for example, many adverbs and adjectives are the kind of things where you're sharing an opinion about something. That's where they kind of sneak into reports, especially with the adverbs. Because I think students kind of get it that, okay, they shouldn't use adjectives because then that's mainly their opinion. We can use probably basic colors. Um, but when we get into lots of fine details, that's where things get kind of opinionated. But with the adverbs, I've seen students use words like suddenly, I've seen them use words like, you know, immediately and slowly and quickly in their report that usually, I guess we call those adverbs of manner when they show how something is done. When you're getting into explaining that kind of how, that is an opinion. So a lot of the times we get the opinions really sneaking into reports like that. And that's something that we need to pay attention to. So, again, just to recap, the fact is something that you can verify, something that you can check. You get a yes or a no. Is this so? Yes. Is it so? No. That those are things that we can get with a fact, right? Those are what we call objective facts in writing. That's what you want students to be thinking when we're thinking about things like we get like variations like on a scale, sometimes, not always, People disagree. Like orange skies are beautiful. For some people, they see an orange sky, they think of sunset or sunrise, and they think that's beautiful. Other people who watch way too much science fiction, would see an orange sky and think, huh, what's going on here? This, alien invasion? But the idea is you get different opinions. So words like beautiful, so different kinds of adjectives like that. Um, they suggest an idea that is held by the writer, and this is not something objective. And there's a distinction here. Even if lots of people agree with you, it's still not objective. It just means that's the popular opinion, right? And so that's the kind of thing that you want to really get students paying attention to at this week when they're looking at reports. And for me, this is like one of the fun topics that we could look at because there's so many things that you can do with identifying facts and opinions. I mean, you can have a list of sentences, typed out, cut out, and, on a board. And you have students, they have to put the sentence in a column. It's one student, you could have them go according to time. How long does it take you to get it and get all right? If you have a group of students, you could put them in teams and have them race against each other to see who gets the most correct within a particular time and that kind of thing. You can do lots and lots of different activities with identifying the difference between facts and opinions. And this is something that definitely you want to begin this week and keep doing because when near the end of the year and early next year, when we're drilling and we're writing full reports, students can sometimes slip and, oh, yeah, I forgot, kind of thing. Or they might write something thinking it's a fact and not realizing it's actually an opinion. And so this week you're starting off with just a recognition, being able to identify it. So a definition that's clear, that they can understand and relate to report writing, plus some activities that would help them identify the differences between. And so you can also have them create their own sentences. And then, facts and opinions. So we could do lots of games and different things. I actually do with my students when we study report writing and we're looking at facts. I do an experiment where, it's a very kind of messy, squishy experiment. And then they have to list, write just like maybe 10 sentences on it. And then we identify which ones are facts, which ones are opinions. And then I show them how to, if they have an opinion, how they can write it in a way that makes it a fact. But this is something that I do with, the students later on after they've done some discussion on facts and opinions a little bit more. We look at how they can change it. And because remember, with report writing, they're creating their own report. So it's not as if they're relating on an actual experience. So they can add in details as they choose. And for that reason, we can do things like that in terms of discussing it and making it more of a fact than an opinion. So that's it. So this week, remember, we have 3 sessions. If you're new, then definitely the idea is that you're spending 3 times for the week outside of this session and outside of class time, reviewing and practicing what we discuss. So this week, the first 20 minutes or so, you can spend maybe 20 minutes on this, going over the definitions, making sure they understand, few examples, have them identify one or the other. And then with the second 30-minute session, 20 to 30-minute session, you can give them a couple worksheets or do a games where, they practice and have fun with the um, reports, looking at facts versus opinions. And then in the third session, repeat the worksheets or have them write a paragraph and or read a paragraph and identify facts and opinions. So 3 looks at this week to make sure students are really clear on what it is. So one should be discussion, introduction, at least one with a game and one with a worksheet that you can sort of review and see that students remember what they need to remember. So reports this week, we're revisiting facts and opinions. You can actually have students read written reports and identify what the facts are. Maybe if they're already writing reports at school, you can look at what their reports, some samples of their own writing, and see if they can identify anywhere that they actually slipped into opinion and that type of thing. So we're really just kind of reviewing and discussing this week, reinforcing the concept of the student is clearly understanding facts and opinions. All right, so that is it for reports. And now we are shifting to narratives. And for narratives, what I want to do is to talk about paragraphs today because we looked at the 5 paragraph structure for reports. And I've had many students tell me, well, okay, Miss, I write 4 paragraphs, I write 5 paragraphs for a narrative. And I've had parents and teachers asking me, what is the average length of a narrative? How many paragraphs should a student write? Now, my answer is it depends. With a report, if you looked at last week's session, you would have heard me say reports should have 5 paragraphs on average. We can work with 4. I think 5 is best. I think 6 is too much, too many paragraphs. Too much information, too many paragraphs. So, and this is because, again, a report is precise, concise, etc. A narrative, even though you want to keep it short, a narrative is different. And the way a paragraph works in a narrative is very different from the way a paragraph works in a report. So, with a narrative paragraph, we're looking at a narrative paragraph does not have to be any particular length, right? Narrative paragraphs don't have to be, um, I hear people talk about like, you must have 5 sentences. You must have, or 3 sentences. So, that there's like a distinction between, um, like how long it has to be in a narrative for it to be considered a paragraph. Um, but the thing is, a narrative paragraph doesn't have to be any particular length. Even at this level, it could even be 1 sentence, right? And it could go in any order in terms of we don't have to follow like the main idea and then supporting details. Um, so it has a variety of structures, right? So we'll call it that, variety of structures. So the narrative writing paragraph is not the same kind of paragraph that you have with a report. It is a different kind of paragraph. And so when we're thinking of narrative paragraphs, we want to think of doesn't have to be any particular length. It could even be 1 sentence, and it has a variety of structures. So you can have like a purely descriptive paragraph. You can have dialogue changes paragraphs. And so, because, with new speakers, you have beginning a new line, new paragraph, and so on. So a narrative paragraph looks very different from a report paragraph. So let me give you something to work with. Um, this is something that I discovered when I was doing research on paragraphs, and I thought it was an excellent way to remind students of how they can create new paragraphs and when to begin a new paragraph in narrative. So, if you're strictly looking at paragraphing, then a narrative story can have anywhere from, I would say, 3 to maybe 8, 9, depending on the length of it. So, a paragraph in a narrative is not about just when you start a new topic and you have a topic sentence. You don't really follow that kind of structure in a narrative. You can actually begin paragraphs for different reasons. And so I tell my students, remember to keep your paragraphs in tip top shape. What does that mean? Well, TI for time, P for place, TO for topic, excuse me, and then the last P for person. So it means then you can start a new paragraph when there is a change in time. So a lot of times you would have, like in the introduction, you start off the story in a particular time, and then let's say you get up and you're dressing for school, and then on your way to school or at school, that's a change in time. It's also a change in place, change in location. That's also a way to know, okay, start a new paragraph. Change in topic. If I'm talking about something else, then I need to give attention to that and to let readers know that I'm talking about something else and I'm changing the topic. I begin a new paragraph. And then finally, as with dialogue in particular, when you have a speaker, so if I say something and then somebody else, another character responds to me, that other character's response begins a new paragraph, right? And so you want to have the students kind of work on that, memorize that. Remember to keep your paragraphs in tip-top shape. So they could learn it as an acronym, or they could um like, you know, do some practice with it. They can actually read stories and see how it changes. They could look at different types of writing and see what the paragraphs look like. And so, what your agenda is this week with the narratives and getting students to understand the paragraphing is that you really want them to see that they're not stuck, or they don't have to keep to this rigid, I need to write 5 paragraphs. And the reason I'm touching on this here, after introducing plot, is because the ultimate thing with a narrative in terms of the formatting is that you follow a plot. It's not about paragraphing, it is about the plot. With a report, you want to keep the 5 paragraphs because that helps you structure your ideas. With a narrative, you want to really structure your ideas around the plot. And so, structuring your ideas around plot means that your paragraphs work more with the plot than they work with this idea that you must have X amount of paragraphs, right? And so, when we have a change in time in our story, we start a new paragraph. We have a change in location, change in place, we start a new paragraph. And so as the plot unfolds, we are helping readers follow the plot by actually using the paragraphs effectively. And so paragraphing in a narrative, I guess you could consider it like an element in and of itself, because it helps with what is called pacing, right? Pacing has to do with how fast or how slow information is shared with readers, right? So I'm just gonna put that up so that you could, pretty much see what I mean. Get that note. Pacing, how fast or how slow information is shared with readers. Now, what does that have to do with paragraphing? Well, we have been taught, and in English, we learn that when we see the beginning of a paragraph, we anticipate that we're going to get new information. So while this concept of tip-top paragraphing might seem kind of new, it is the way paragraphs are generally written in English. And so it's sort of like an innate understanding in readers that a new paragraph means new information. And so you get that kind of excitement when you see a new paragraph. You think, okay, we're moving on. There's some sort of movement in terms of ideas, and there's a lot of energy happening with a new paragraph. And so when you have new paragraphs, short paragraphs, you get like a speeding up of information, at least in the mind of the reader. So we get, information kind of coming like that. But when we have a long paragraph, and let's say lots of sentences and lots of details in that paragraph, readers slow down because now they're thinking this big chunk of details, all this information is on the same thing because it's in one paragraph. There's no new time, no new place, no new topic, no new people here. All of this is on the same thing. And so we have all of this to read. Let me buckle down and slow down and see if I could understand all of this. So when we have long paragraphs in a narrative, we end up with readers slowing down and sometimes feeling a little bit overwhelmed if there's a lot of information there all at once. And so if within the one paragraph we get a lot of changes and different places, different times, lots of people coming and going, everybody talking in the same paragraph, is going to end up a little bit confusing to readers. So, really and truly, once you get the plot and you know that, okay, I'm following this plot, really what you're doing is then using your paragraphs to move the plot forward and to move the action forward, move the energy forward for the readers. So a paragraph isn't going to be like, okay, let me just see how much I could put in it. That's not what a narrative paragraph is all about. A narrative paragraph is about pacing. It is about moving the story forward, moving the plot forward, and so readers kind of innately expect this and understand it. And so paragraphing can actually be used as an element in a story to make stories more exciting and to slow things down when you want to slow them down. So you end up with something like, if you want things to move faster and readers to think, okay, all of these things are happening, then short paragraphs, like maybe two, three sentences in a paragraph, one sentence on occasion to get readers to focus on that experience. So, on whatever detail that you're putting in that one paragraph. And then you can slow things down, longer paragraphs. So usually introductions tend to be slightly longer paragraphs. Introductions and conclusions tend to be slightly longer paragraphs in a narrative than the middle bit, simply because in the middle you're moving things forward with the action and all of that. And then you could, pace it out. So if you're working with a 12-point plot, which I recommend, highly recommend, especially for students who can't seem to get started properly, or they're not finishing, or their stories feel like they're missing something, work with the 12-point plot and begin thinking about how to use the paragraphing in that. So you might even end up, you could do like one paragraph per plot element, but then if you're going to do that, then you want really short paragraphs, like maybe two or three sentences. If you can group some of them together, you can do a few more, but it is really flexible. And I know lots of people want, okay, just tell me how long is it supposed to be? Well, there's a reason why when you're checking books and so on, in terms of we tend to work with page numbers and word count rather than how many paragraphs, especially with narratives, simply because of the flexibility with the narrative paragraph. right? So this week, in your 3 sessions, working with the narrative paragraph, first session, 20 to 30 minutes, you want to introduce this to students, have them read some things, um, read some passages, read some short stories, select from books that they're reading and kind of like really look and say, hey, what does the paragraphing look like? Especially paragraphing when it comes to dialogue. We are going to talk about dialogue later on, but just to know, especially when it comes to something like dialogue, you really want to look at how the dialogue is written, what is written, how the paragraphs are indented, and so on. And so, paying attention to paragraphs with narrative writing this week, start by taking a look. Introduce the tip top concept, taking a look, and then second session, you might want the student to like do a review. What does the tip top mean? Have them maybe dramatize it to remember it. Have them draw it or write it down to remember it. And so we're continuing the interaction there. And then in the third session, you might want the student to review their own writing and see where they could maybe start a new paragraph. If maybe they have too much information in one paragraph, where would they break it and how would they break that to show readers that a new paragraph is beginning? And so that's what you really want to focus on this week with the narratives. Take a look at paragraphing so that readers would know how things go. And this is something that, of course, this is just the beginning, just the introduction to it, but you really want students to get it. And it's also something that you're going to be looking at over and over and over. But once we have that understanding and they know what it means to have their paragraphing in tip top shape, then in the future, when you're looking at their complete writing, you could talk about like what some you can tell them, hey, this paragraph isn't in tip-top shape. What's wrong with it? Why is it, not following tip-top? And then they get that reminder, and then they could look at it and say, okay, yeah, we have a change in time here. We have a change in person here. And so that practice. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not as if you tell them once and they're going to automatically get it. Doesn't quite work like that. But once you share the information and we do the review, that's what we're focusing on. It feels like a pause. Like I said, it feels like a pause with dealing with the plot, but it's really kind of like just a minor detour because remember I said you want to focus on plot more than paragraphing in of narrative. You don't want students to focus on trying to keep their writing to 4 paragraphs or trying to keep their writing to 5 paragraphs. That's not what narratives are about. You want them to focus on completing the plot. Now, they can decide where they want to put the plot information depending on how long they think they want to write, but they should not be confined to any particular paragraph length. All right, so I think I've said that in several different ways, repeated it because it is that important. It makes a difference when students are writing complete stories, not to be bogged down by, I have to make this length of paragraphing or I have to get this amount of paragraphing done. We really want, did you get your plot complete? Can I identify all 12 points in the plot? If I can, then that works. The issue then, if you have 3 paragraphs and you have all of that, are the paragraphs structured properly? Go back over it with tip top and see how that could be adjusted. All right. So that's it for the narratives. We've covered the reports. And now, so let's look at comprehension. For comprehension this week, I would like you to turn your attention to beginning some details. So if you've been following the lives, you would know that we looked at the different types of questions. We looked at the fact that there are four different types of comprehension texts. In the exam, students encounter three, but there are four because we have nonfiction, fiction, poetry, and graphic. In the exam, they always get a graphic, they always get a poem, but they would either get a nonfiction text or a fiction text. And so we're studying each one separately to make sure students understand each one. And so for this week, we are introducing nonfiction passages. And it's going to coincide with a lot of what you do with the reports because one of the key elements of nonfiction passages has to do with main ideas. So you want to deal with things like topic sentences and main ideas during this week when you're looking at the nonfiction being introduced to nonfiction. All right. And so, what is a topic sentence? What is a main idea? Where do topic sentences go? Maybe have students read, identify different topics for nonfiction, what kind of language is used in nonfiction, and you want to pay attention to the purpose of a nonfiction passage. And so starting with the purpose really helps. And we looked at all the general types of purpose, but you want to specifically look at why do people write nonfiction? What are they hoping to accomplish with nonfiction? So any form of spoken or written or spoken work that presents factual information, ideas, or events. So you can a report that the students have to write. That's like information about an event or an activity or an experience and so on. We can do nonfiction about ideas. And so you really want to look at what is nonfiction? Why do people write it? What does it look like? What kind of language is used? So, what kind of structure, what kind of formatting, you know, um, topic sentence and the main idea. Sometimes you have a main idea for the entire passage. Um, am I informing only? Am I trying to persuade? We could use nonfiction to persuade as well. And so we're just really generally exploring nonfiction in the comprehension aspect. So we might do some reading, discussing of comprehension, and so on. And so we want to look at topic sentences, main ideas, etc. So during your practice this week and during your revision, what you're doing is in the first session, introducing like the definition of nonfiction, what it is, what it looks like, different kinds of nonfiction texts, what they look like, looking at the purpose. What is the purpose of each type? Why do people create this kind of writing, nonfiction writing? Then we want to, in the second session, focus on the topic sentences and main ideas. What do they look like? What is the difference between a main idea and a supporting detail? What constitutes a main idea? What represents a supporting detail? There's a difference between an idea and a detail, and that's what you want to look at in the second 20 to 30-minute session this week. And for the third one, you can go like 30 minutes roughly. You want to do like maybe do some worksheets, identifying main ideas, looking at the differences between main ideas and detail, um, deciding if a sentence has a main idea or a detail. You want to look at reviewing the students' understanding of what nonfiction is. You can also talk about the nonfiction structures. So we have chronological order, we have cause and effect, and a few others. And so you could look at that as well. And that's what your agenda is this week, really understanding what a nonfiction looks like and just exploring all the elements and factors involved in nonfiction. So we're not actually doing comprehension yet, and I want to make sure and add that in. We're not testing, we're not doing a nonfiction and answer questions. We're not answering questions yet. We're not looking at comprehension itself yet. We're starting at the foundation of understanding what does nonfiction even look like. And so that is what we're exploring. And so we can go to like I said, present students with nonfiction writing, have them read things and discuss the purpose and the structure and all of that, and that's what we are introducing. And you can do lots of activities with those, because with the nonfiction purpose, we have the different aspects. Okay, is this just straight information? Am I presenting an idea? Is this an event we can identify? With the nonfiction's paragraph structure, we have topic sentences and main ideas. With the nonfiction organizational structure, like what does the nonfiction passage actually look like? We have chronological order, cause and effect, problem solution, description, but it's a different kind of description from the narrative description. This kind of description for nonfiction looks at details and not actually, we want details of how something might work or what it actually looks like if we're going to analyze a thing. That's very different from giving our opinions and expressions about it, which is what the narrative description would look like. So, those kinds of distinctions, that is what you're looking at this week in terms of making sure a student, when they see a text, they should be able to say, "Oh, this is kind of like nonfiction. I think I'm seeing some causes and effects here. I'm seeing a problem, so there may be a solution. Chronological order. Okay, this is a process, and what types of writing would be constituted in each kind of nonfiction, because there are different kinds of nonfiction. And so that's all you're spending your time on this week, making sure the student thoroughly understands this. Because next week, when we continue with nonfiction, then we're going to look at what kinds of questions um, the examiners could probably ask with nonfiction, right? And so this is what I do with my students, but of course with them, we go through the practice. So I go through the practice with them and help them answer questions. We identify the kinds of questions, and I go through a host of activities with them to really help them understand this. And then we play some games and so on, do some quizzes dealing with the nonfiction, because there's a lot really to when you're presenting nonfiction. There's a lot that could be covered. I generally spend like about 2 weeks working on nonfiction. And of course, if they're still having trouble understanding, what it looks like, we want to also have them reading and building some vocabulary where nonfiction is concerned. So formal words, sentence structure, how are things presented? So we're really kind of going into details with the nonfiction. And so when I go with my students, I go into that kind of detail so they can really understand how to read and understand how to get information from nonfiction. All right. So that is it. I think that's the end of what it is I wanted to cover today. So we have three things. So you have some work to do this week. For the narrative writing, okay, let's have some reports. For the report writing, you're looking at facts and opinions, sticking to the facts, what that looks like, etc. You have your agenda for the week. For the narrative writing, we're dealing with paragraphing. You have your stuff to do for the week. And then for comprehension, we're introducing the idea of nonfiction and the fact that people read nonfiction for certain reasons. People write nonfiction for certain reasons, what that structure is, what it looks like, and the kind of information you generally get with nonfiction. that's what you're focusing on this week. So we have those three things. We have our agenda. If you have your study schedule, make sure you have 3 sessions um, to work on for each one. And then this is kind of like laying the foundation for all the different things that we'll be talking about for each of the narratives, reports, and comprehension. So this session, I hope that it covered, you got some insight, and so you know how we're moving forward and where we're beginning, what we're doing, and so we're pacing ourselves with the schedule. So that is it for today. Let me make sure and put up my number. WhatsApp is preferred because I am quite often in a class or some kind of presentation. Um, so WhatsApp is preferred. But when it comes to like the report writing, that activity that I told you about that I do with my students, it's in the textbook that I have on report writing. And there are some follow-up activities for it. So you can check me for that if you'd like to get more information on that. The tip-top paragraphing, if you have any questions, you can WhatsApp about that. And with the comprehension, with the nonfiction, if you're interested in finding out about comprehension classes, I do have a comprehension class running, and we're actually dealing with nonfiction right now. So it's not too late to join the class if you want to join. I'm trying to keep it small, but I have room for like maybe 1 or 2 people if you're interested in that. So send me a WhatsApp message. And certainly, if you want to get a copy of the past papers, answers with explanations, I have the 2019 up to 2024 so that you can get the answers and see why certain answers work better than others. And you could really kind of study those to also see how the questions are asked. That is also a key point in recognizing and being able to answer comprehension effectively. How are questions asked? What is expected of me? You can get a copy of the past papers. The blank ones are available on the ministry's website. I also have blank copies from 2019. And so you could, send me a WhatsApp if you have any questions or you want to get a copy of those. So that is it for today. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you for checking in with me and asking questions. If at any time you have any questions related to comprehension reports or narratives, let me know. I'll answer you the question and I can share the information because I think if you have the question, maybe other people are asking it as well so that I can answer the question and share with as many people as possible to help on this journey to SEA 2025. So I look forward to seeing you again next week when we continue with our lives and lots of information and discussion. Check into the Facebook page, like and subscribe on YouTube because we're only on the Facebook page on YouTube. We're not streaming in the group anymore as per Facebook changes, but you can still get the lives archived on YouTube, on my Facebook page, and on my website as well. If you're not sure what those locations are, check in SCA Peaceful Approach. I always put a link there. All the links are there. Or you can just WhatsApp me and I'll send you the links. Not a problem whatsoever. All right. So have a wonderful rest of the day today, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.